The people who were arrested, they were immediately taken to an army interrogation centre and beaten. A lot of torture and that kind of thing, because these were people, they were either from the PKI or they weren't from the PKI, but the military were always trying to get names and who is your friend and where do you live and who is your neighbour and all that kind of thing. So people would be very intensively interrogated, and but that would be in another place, a special military command. And then after they'd finished with them there, they would come to this hovel, this place, with the, as I was describing to you, with all these tiny little rooms at the back and a sort of area, an open area like a yard. I think there was a well there where we could get water and stuff like that. So the women had a few rooms on this side, but most of the rooms, as I say, were occupied by men. And these were people, many of whom had been tortured and had all kinds of, wounds and scars and so on. So it was but of course people, by the time they got there, they were relieved, because this was not actually an interrogation centre. It was just a holding place, although sometimes people would be called from there, taken somewhere else to be interrogated. But it wasn't actually an interrogation centre, this place. So from a certain point of view, it was like a bit relaxed. And it was situated in a place called Lapangan Banteng in Jakarta. I remember that, yeah. And of course we were not allowed to go out of this place. And then subsequently things happened. And because I, being English, some of the officers would think, oh, this is interesting, maybe we can talk to her in English and, sort of maybe learn a little bit of English. So at one point I was actually moved to another place by a colonel on the understanding that I would give English lessons to his officers. Yes. And this was actually a rather nice place. I mean, not much nicer than this horrible place. So I was put in this place, and so one of the things I remember saying to him, yes, okay, but I need some newspapers, because we were not... So he said, okay, because I said, then I can have material and so on and so on. So I was moved to another place, which was, a few steps above this place. And I think we actually had, not beds exactly, but sort of like you have in a bunk or something like that. And there I would give lessons. Yeah, of course, then I would get newspapers, and I was even allowed to have a radio, and I had a few kind of privileges, you see. Because he thought, well, he might as well use me. And the colonel, I mean, as far as his attitude towards me concerned, was nice. I mean, it was not brutal or anything, which you would be getting in this interrogation centre. So it was very nice. How are your children? Have you got any news from them? This kind of thing. So it was sort of much more relaxed. And I'd have classes, I don't know whether it was every day with the officers, and I mean, I didn't know how to teach English really, but I sort of made it up. Of course, I had actually, later on when I was in prison, I did do a lot of teaching of English with the prisoners. Yes, I used to, we used to have classes, you see, in English. So I always had a sort of an extra value, as it were, also for the prisoners, because oh, English, oh, nice. So then I was, from this place, I was actually allowed to stay. This colonel, he decided to let me stay with so there were people visiting me, okay? Because Ben Anderson knew that I was in prison, so he sent his whoever it was. And then there was an Australian woman, Mary. And I think she was asked to come and see me while I was still in this awful place. And she was a very, not abrasive, very talkative kind of a woman, you know. And she would sometimes say to the office, "Why do you keep this woman like this? What is it?" You know, she'd really pummel them, you see. Of course, they'd be very gentle and say, "Oh, yes," you know, they had to be polite because she had been Mary Saronan, I think her name was. She had been, as it were, alerted as to my position by the World Council of Churches. Not that because I don't have any connection with the World Council, but they were the ones who said, "Look, you better go and do it." So she used to bring me parcels of food and things like that. And as I say, she was very aggressive in her attitude towards the soldiers. You know, like, "Why are you doing this? What's she done wrong?" You know, and this kind of thing that Indonesians would never do. So I think she was partly responsible for their feeling a bit guilty towards me and moving me to another place where this colonel was, where I was teaching English.
And were there any other prisoners there?
Yes, there were a few. It was there were just a few people, and one or two people were really held in awful circumstances in a little cell that was hardly larger than a small lavatory, you know, when you have a very small place, just enough room for the loo and just a little door. I mean, some of them were really, really. And you'd hear them crying or screaming sometimes. But generally speaking, there were not a lot of prisoners there. But I was given this privileged room, a nicer room, with another woman. There was another woman. And so I would teach English, and I got newspapers, and I think I even had a radio, and, you know, things like this. I could listen to music. So I spent a few months in this place, and then this colonel decided to allow me to go home, but not home actually, to stay in the home in a what do you call it, a hostel run by the PGI. It's the Organization of Churches, the Indonesian Community of Churches, and they had a house in Tuku Umar, which is where I was actually living. So I was allowed to stay there, and of course it was very nice. First they only allowed me to go over the weekends, and then for a while I actually stayed there. But then what happened was that there were other people in the army and thought, "What the hell's going on? You know, why is she being treated specially?" So, you know, so they then put me into prison. So they came one day. In fact, they came one day while I was teaching some. I think I also had some other teachers. I had some other pupils in this PKE place. I had some people who used to come and I used to give them lessons and so on. And I was in the middle of a lesson, and suddenly some soldiers came and said, we're taking you away. And this was probably something like 1969, early 70. So they took me from there, and they took me to the women's prison, which was Bukit Duri. So that was like final, because once you get into the prison, there is no way out. You just stay there, as it were, effectively forever.